I am Alia, 35 years old, and my entire existence currently fits inside a single clear plastic evidence bag. As a forensic accountant, my entire career has been built on analyzing the aftermath of disasters. I am trained to look at shattered pieces of information at ruined ledgers and broken companies and make logical sense of them. But there is no logic to be found in the freezing, sterile hallway of this Atlanta hospital. There is only a profound, suffocating emptiness. I stand under the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights, my fingers gripping the thick plastic of the bag so tightly that my knuckles have turned completely white. Inside the bag sits my husband Terrence's wedding band. It is heavily charred, the gold warped by a heat I cannot even begin to comprehend. Beside it rests a soot-stained fabric bow that used to belong to my 7-year-old daughter Kayla, and a melted piece of plastic that was once my eldest son Jamari's favorite action figure. Beneath those are the remnants of my twin boys Isaiah and Jordan, two matching pacifiers scorched and blackened. Just 6 hours ago, my house was vibrating with the beautiful, chaotic noise of our Saturday morning routine. Terrence, brilliant and endlessly patient, was a software architect who worked grueling hours during the week just so he could dedicate his weekends entirely to our 4 children. I can still see him standing in the foyer, zipping up coats and tying tiny shoelaces. He had planned to take the kids to the new interactive science museum downtown so I could have a few quiet hours to finalize a massive corporate audit. He kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and herded our beautiful, loud, vibrant family into the SUV. The police officer who knocked on my door 3 hours later did not look me in the eye. He stared at a spot on the wall just above my shoulder as he explained that a drunk driver going 80 miles an hour in the wrong direction had crested the overpass. The impact had sent Terrence's vehicle through the concrete barrier and plummeting to the highway below. The explosion was instantaneous. The officer used words like catastrophic and immediate, words designed to offer a clinical sort of comfort. They meant my family did not suffer. They meant my husband and my 4 babies were wiped from the face of the earth in a fraction of a second. The hospital staff will not let me see them. The doctors and grief counselors have gently but firmly advised against it, telling me it is better to remember them as they were. So I am left standing in this corridor with a plastic bag, trying to remember how to pull air into my lungs. The physical sensation of this grief is not a dull ache. It is a violent tearing pain in the center of my chest, as if someone has reached into my rib cage and crushed my heart with their bare hands. I am trembling so violently that my teeth are chattering despite the heavy wool coat draped over my shoulders. In this moment of absolute bottomless despair, human instinct overrides everything else. I am a grown woman, a successful professional, a wife, and a mother. But standing in the ruins of my life, I just want my father. I need my parents to hold me, to tell me how I am supposed to survive the next minute, let alone the rest of my life. I pull my phone from my pocket. The screen is cracked from when I dropped it on the hardwood floor of our entryway after hearing the police officer's words. My hands are shaking so badly that it takes me 3 attempts to unlock it and dial my father's number. The phone rings. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. With every second that passes, I pray for Desmond to pick up. I pray for the deep, booming voice of my father to anchor me to the earth before I float away into the void. The line connects. Loud, heavy bass music immediately floods through the speaker, accompanied by the clinking of glasses and the roar of a celebrating crowd. "Yeah, Aaliyah, make it quick," my father Desmond says. His voice is annoyed, strained over the loud thumping of the music in the background. "We are in the middle of something, Dad," I gasp. The word tears up my throat. I am struggling to breathe, my chest heaving as the tears finally spill over my eyelashes and run down my face. "Dad, it is Terrence. And the kids." There was a crash on the overpass. A drunk driver hit them. I stop speaking to swallow a sob that threatens to choke me. I press my hand against the cold cinder block wall of the hospital to keep my legs from giving out. "Dad, they are gone. All of them. Terrence and the babies. They are dead." The silence on the line lasts for perhaps 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, I expect the music in the background to cut out. I expect to hear my father shout for my mother Valerie. I expect the panicked, desperate rush of parents dropping everything to sprint to their child in her darkest hour. Instead, the thumping bass continues. I can hear someone laughing in the background, a sharp, joyous sound that pierces straight through my eardrum. Alia, my father says. His voice does not waver. It does not crack. It is chillingly flat, devoid of any warmth, any shock, any grief. Today is Trevon's 30th birthday. We've booked the VIP lounge at the Regent. We can't come. Handle the arrangements and we'll call you next week. The line goes dead. I pull the phone away from my ear and stare at the darkened screen. The call lasted exactly 42 seconds. In 42 seconds, my father weighed the deaths of his son-in-law and his 4 grandchildren against bottle service at a nightclub for my brother, and he made his choice. A nurse walking past stops and asks if I need to sit down, her eyes wide with concern as she looks at my face. I cannot speak. I simply shake my head and slowly slide down the wall until I am sitting on the hard linoleum floor, pulling my knees to my chest. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a man acting out of shock. This is the ultimate inevitable culmination of 35 years of being the scapegoat in my own family. Growing up, my brother Trevin was the undisputed center of our universe. Desmond and Valerie worshipped the ground he walked on. He was the golden child, the boy who could do no wrong even when he constantly did. When I graduated at the top of my university class with a degree in accounting, my parents skipped my commencement ceremony because Trevon needed help moving into a luxury apartment they were paying for. When I passed my certification exams to become a forensic accountant, my mother told me it was a nice backup plan, but asked why I could not be more entrepreneurial like my brother. Trevin's entrepreneurial spirit consisted of launching a high-end real estate firm that bled money from the day it opened. My parents poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into his failing business, taking out second mortgages and depleting their retirement funds to keep the facade of his success alive in Atlanta's high society. I was the responsible one, the quiet daughter who built a stable, lucrative career without asking them for a single dime. Because I required no maintenance, they treated me as an afterthought. Because I needed no financial rescuing, they deemed me unworthy of their attention. When Terrence and I got married, my parents arrived an hour late to the ceremony because Trevin had misplaced his custom-tailored suit jacket, and they refused to leave the house until it was found. Terrence had held my hands in this bridal suite, wiping my tears with his thumbs, and told me that from that day forward, we were our own family. He promised to give me the unconditional love they were completely incapable of providing. And he did. For 10 beautiful years, Terrence loved me loudly and fiercely. He built a fortress of warmth and safety around me and our children, shielding us from the toxic transactional dynamic of my parents and brother. Terrence was my entire support system. He was my home. Now, sitting on the floor of the hospital with the smell of smoke still lingering on the plastic bag in my lap, I realize how truly defenseless I am. My fortress has been burned to the ground. My home has been destroyed. I look down at the scorched wedding band. I trace the outline of it through the plastic. The utter absurdity of my father's words echoes in my mind. Handle the arrangements and we'll call you next week. As if I had called to complain about a broken water heater. As if the lives of my husband and my 4 innocent babies were a minor inconvenience interrupting the popping of champagne corks at a nightclub. A coldness begins to spread through my veins, starting at my fingertips and slowly creeping toward my chest. It is a different kind of numbness than the shock of the accident. This is the chilling, absolute realization of my reality. I am completely alone in the world. The people whose blood runs through my veins have abandoned me in the very moment my universe collapsed. They did not just fail me today, they discarded me. I slowly push myself up from the floor. My legs are unsteady, but the violent trembling has stopped. I brush the dust off my coat. I grip the plastic evidence bag tightly against my chest. I will handle the arrangements. I will pick out 5 caskets. I will choose the burial plots. I will write the eulogies. I will do it all by myself, just as I have done everything in my life. But I will never, as long as I have breath in my body, forget the 42-second phone call, where my father told me my family's lives were worth less than my brother's birthday party. The heavy scent of white lilies and polished mahogany will haunt me for the rest of my life. 4 days after the 42-second phone call that shattered my reality, I stood in the cavernous sanctuary of our community church. The air was thick and suffocating, vibrating with the low, mournful hum of the organ playing a somber hymn. But I barely heard the music. My entire focus was anchored to the front of the altar, where 5 closed caskets sat in a devastating row. One large dark wood casket for Terrence. Beside him, 4 smaller pristine white caskets for Jamari, Kayla, Isaiah, and Jordan. They looked so impossibly small from where I stood. I was standing completely alone in the front row. The usher had gently approached me 20 minutes before the service began, offering a sympathetic smile as he pointed to the 2 entire rows of pews directly behind me. They were draped with thick velvet cords, marked with polished brass signs that read, "Reserved for immediate family." He asked me in a soft, pitying whisper if we should delay the service to wait for my parents and my brother to arrive. I looked at the empty wooden benches, perfectly polished and utterly vacant, and felt that same creeping numbness wash over my skin. I told the usher they were not coming. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and profound sorrow before quietly removing the velvet cords. As the service began, I did not look back, but I could hear the rustle of clothing and the quiet sobs of the people filling those empty family seats. Terrence's colleagues from his software development firm slid into the pews my father should have occupied. The teachers from my children's elementary and preschool took the seats where my mother should have sat. Neighbors, friends, and mere acquaintances showed up to mourn my entire world, offering the tears and the presents that my own blood relatives actively withheld. Standing there in my black dress, staring at the white caskets of my babies, the generational trauma of my family, dynamic surfaced with agonizing clarity. I am a forensic accountant. My brain is wired to find patterns, to track discrepancies, and to balance ledgers. The ledger of my family's love had always been hopelessly unbalanced. My parents, Desmond and Valerie, had spent their entire lives protecting the peace and catering to the whims of my older brother Trevon. Even now, on the day I was burying my entire family, I knew exactly why they were not here. A funeral for 5 people was too depressing for Trevon. It would carry too much bad energy. And Desmond and Valerie would never force their golden child to endure a moment of discomfort, even if it meant abandoning their daughter to bury her children alone. Trevon was a 30-year-old man who still operated with the entitlement of a spoiled toddler. He ran a so-called luxury real estate firm in Buckhead that was practically hemorrhaging money. As an auditor, I had seen the catastrophic state of his finances years ago. I had warned my parents that he was drowning in bad investments and unpaid vendor invoices. My father had called me a jealous hater, accusing me of trying to sabotage my brother's success simply because I chose a boring, quiet life balancing books. Desmond and Valerie had quietly liquidated a massive portion of their own retirement funds to keep Trevon's business afloat, buying him a leased luxury car to maintain his image of wealth. My milestones were always eclipsed by Trevon's failures. My quiet, steady success was ignored because it did not require their intervention. And now my ultimate tragedy was ignored because it interfered with their preferred reality. 3 days after the hardest day of my life, the quiet of my empty house was broken by the sharp, impatient ringing of the doorbell. I was wearing one of Terrence's old college sweatshirts, moving through the silent living room like a ghost. I opened the front door to find Trevon standing on my porch. Beside him was his entitled white wife, Chloe. She was wearing designer sunglasses pushed up into her perfectly styled hair and holding a ridiculously expensive iced coffee. They did not bring food. They did not bring flowers. They did not even offer a hug. Trevon pushed past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. Chloe followed closely, immediately wrinkling her nose as she looked around my darkened living room. The curtains were drawn, and the toys my children had left on the floor the morning they died were still exactly where they had dropped them. "It is so depressing in here, Aaliyah," Chloe said, sighing loudly, as she walked past a pair of my daughter's tiny pink sneakers. "You really need to open some windows and let some light in. This dark vibe is terrible for your aura. You cannot just wallow forever." I stared at her, genuinely unable to process the sheer audacity of her words. It had been exactly 1 week since my family was killed. I closed the front door, my hand gripping the brass handle until my palm ached. "Why are you here, Trevon?" I asked, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Trevon paced across the hardwood floor, refusing to look at the framed family photographs lining the hallway walls. "Look, Aaliyah," he began, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I know you are going through a hard time right now. Really hard. But the world keeps spinning and we all have to keep moving forward." "Get to the point," I said coldly. He cleared his throat, shifting his weight. "The real estate market is brutal right now. You know how it is. My firm is facing a temporary cash flow issue due to some delayed closings. I know Terrence had a massive life insurance policy through his tech company. Plus the policies on the kids. You are about to be sitting on a huge pile of cash that you do not even need right now, since you are by yourself." My breath caught in my throat. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "I need a loan," Trevon said, his voice dropping into a demanding entitled register. $200,000, just to bridge the gap for my business until the end of the quarter. You can afford it and it stays in the family. "You did not come to their funeral." I whispered the words, trembling with a rage so profound it tasted like copper in my mouth. "You did not come to say goodbye to your own nephews and your niece. But you came here into the house they grew up in to ask me for the money generated by their deaths." Before Trevon could defend his grotesque request, his phone began to ring. He pulled it out of his pocket, glanced at the screen and answered it immediately, putting it on speakerphone. It was my mother, Valerie. "Trevon, did you talk to your sister yet?" Valerie's voice echoed sharply through the quiet foyer. "She is being difficult," Mom Trevon replied, casting a glaring look in my direction. "Alia," my mother commanded through the speaker, her tone dripping with intense disapproval. "Stop acting like a selfish, hysterical widow. Your brother needs your help. Terrence is gone and crying in the dark is not going to bring him back. Trevon's business is the legacy of this family. You have no husband now. You have no children. You only have us. Do not ruin your relationship with your brother over money you do not even know what to do with." The absolute, unadulterated cruelty of her words snapped the final fragile thread of loyalty, tying me to my bloodline. The shock evaporated, leaving behind a cold, calculating fury that hardened my spine. I stepped forward, closing the distance between myself and my brother. "Get out," I said. "Aaliyah, be reasonable," Chloe chimed in, crossing her arms defensively. "You are acting crazy." "I said get out of my house." I repeated, my voice rising to a fierce, commanding volume that echoed off the high ceilings. "Get out of my house right now before I call the police and have you both arrested for trespassing. Take your terrible aura, take your failing business and get off my property." Trevon scoffed, shaking his head as if I were a petulant child throwing a tantrum. He grabbed Chloe by the arm and pulled her toward the door. "You are going to regret this, Aaliyah," he threatened, stepping out onto the porch. "When you finally wake up and realize you have absolutely nobody left in this world, do not come crawling to us." I slammed the heavy wooden door shut, engaging the deadbolt with a loud, satisfying click. I stood in the silence of the foyer for a long time, my chest heaving, listening to the sound of Trevon's luxury car speeding aggressively out of my driveway. The house was painfully quiet again, but the energy inside me had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer just a grieving mother and widow. I was a survivor who had just recognized the true face of the enemy, seeking comfort. I walked slowly down the hallway and pushed open the door to Terrence's home office. The room still smelled like him, a mixture of clean laundry detergent, cedarwood, and the faint metallic scent of his computer hardware. His multiple monitors sat dark on the large oak desk. His ergonomic chair was pushed back exactly as he had left it. I needed to feel close to him. I needed to do something productive to keep my mind from fracturing into a million pieces. I decided to start packing up his office, searching for anything that would make me feel his presence one last time. I grabbed a cardboard box from the garage and began sorting through the files on his desk. Terrence was meticulously organized. Everything was labeled, categorized, and filed with precision. I emptied the top drawers, organizing his notebooks and pens. Then I pulled the heavy bottom drawer all the way out to ensure nothing had slipped to the back. As I pulled the wooden drawer free from its tracks and set it on the floor, my fingers brushed against something rough taped to the underside of the desk frame. I frowned, kneeling down on the carpet and reaching into the dark cavity beneath the desk. My fingers traced the outline of a thick piece of masking tape securing a small rigid object to the wood. I peeled the tape back carefully. A small manila envelope fell into the palm of my hand. I sat back on my heels, staring at the envelope in confusion. It was completely hidden, placed in a spot no one would ever find, unless they were dismantling the desk entirely. My heart began to race as I broke the seal and tipped the envelope upside down. A small, heavy brass key dropped into my lap. It was clearly a key for a bank safety deposit box stamped with a serial number. Accompanying the key was a single piece of lined paper folded neatly in half. I unfolded the paper. It was written in Terrence's distinct slanted handwriting. The ink was dark and deliberate. I read the words once, and then I read them again, my breath catching in my throat as the magnitude of the message washed over me. The note contained only 2 sentences. For Aaliyah. If they ever try to take what is ours. The small, heavy brass key sat in my palm. The jagged edges pressed sharply into my skin as I stared at Terrence's familiar handwriting on that single piece of lined paper. For Aaliyah. If they ever try to take what is ours. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. I sat on the hardwood floor of his home office, watching the sun slowly rise over the Atlanta skyline, waiting for the exact moment the financial district would open. My grief was still a massive, suffocating weight, pressing down on my chest. But the discovery of the key had ignited something else beneath it. It was a spark of pure, unadulterated focus. I arrived at the First Fidelity branch in Midtown right at 9 in the morning. The bank manager, a tall man in a tailored suit, offered his condolences with a practiced sadness. However, his eyes held a distinct flicker of surprise when I presented the brass key and stated the box number. He escorted me down a quiet carpeted hallway and into the vault. The heavy steel gate closed behind me with a resounding echo, locking out the noise of the city. Left alone in the private, windowless viewing room, I placed the long metal box on the polished mahogany table. My hands were remarkably steady. The paralyzing, breathless agony that had consumed me during the funeral had been entirely replaced by a cold, clinical determination. I am a forensic accountant. I have spent my entire adult life uncovering truths hidden in numbers. Terrence knew this better than anyone, and he had left me a trail to follow. I took a deep breath and unlocked the lid. Inside the box lay 2 thick premium leather-bound portfolios. I pulled the first one out and opened the cover. The top document was a fully executed acquisition agreement bearing the watermark of one of the largest multinational technology conglomerates in the world. As my eyes scanned the densely packed legal jargon, my breath hitched in my throat. Terrence had always been brilliant. He spent countless late nights at his computer, writing complex code, telling me he was working on a revolutionary data encryption algorithm for cloud-based security. I knew he was talented, but I had completely underestimated the absolute magnitude of his creation. According to the signed contracts, the conglomerate had purchased Terrence's proprietary algorithm exactly 1 month before the fatal crash. The final acquisition price, printed boldly at the bottom of the signature page, was $350 million. I stared at the 9-figure number until the zeros began to blur together. Terrence had not just secured our financial future, he had built a legitimate empire. But the true genius of my husband lay in the following pages of the portfolio. Intensely aware of the toxic, opportunistic, and greedy nature of my family, Terrence had refused a standard corporate payout. Instead, he had enlisted elite financial attorneys to structure the entire acquisition through a complex series of shell companies. They had effectively washed the transaction off public records, eventually funneling the massive post-tax capital into a bulletproof blind trust. I turned to the beneficiary designation forms. The sole uncontested beneficiary of that massive trust was me. No one else had access. No one else could even confirm it existed. I was sitting completely alone in a bank vault, a grieving widow dressed in black, and I was secretly one of the wealthiest women in the state of Georgia. A profound wave of gratitude washed over me. Terrence had spent his final months making sure that no matter what happened, his wife and children would be untouchable. But that warmth was quickly overshadowed by the dark, heavy presence of the second leather portfolio resting at the bottom of the metal box. I reached in and pulled it out. The label on the front was handwritten by Terrence. It simply read, Trevon and Desmond. I opened the cover, and the forensic auditor inside me immediately recognized the layout. It was a meticulously compiled financial dossier. There were highlighted bank statements, commercial property deeds, and internal accounting ledgers from Trevon's failing luxury real estate brokerage in Buckhead. I spread the papers across the polished viewing table, my eyes darting rapidly across columns of glaring red ink. Trevon was not just bad at managing a business, he was drowning in an ocean of catastrophic corporate debt. According to the ledgers, he had defaulted on multiple high-interest commercial bridge loans, and his creditors were aggressively preparing to seize every asset he possessed. Then I found the commercial loan guarantee. It was dated 8 months prior to the accident. The document secured a massive, desperate line of credit for $18 million to bail out Trevon's firm and keep his extravagant lifestyle intact. I looked at the section detailing the collateral for this massive loan. It was not real estate. Trevon did not own anything of actual value. The collateral listed was Terrence's intellectual property. They had used the source code of my husband's encryption algorithm to secure their debt. I stared at the signature line at the bottom of the guarantee. There, written in bold black ink, was Terrence's name. But the slant of the letter T was slightly off. The pressure of the pen strokes was far too heavy, lacking my husband's usual fluid motion. I had signed 1,000 documents next to Terrence. I knew his handwriting as intimately as my own. It was a blatant, undeniable forgery. The betrayal deepened as I dug further into the dossier. Attached to the fraudulent loan agreement were printed email chains between my father, Desmond, and a predatory private equity firm based in Chicago. Desmond had used his long-standing respected reputation in the Atlanta business community to vouch for the transaction. My own father had actively facilitated the theft of my husband's lifework. I had manipulated institutional lenders to save his golden child from the public embarrassment of a highly visible bankruptcy. They had stolen Terrence's intellectual property, forged his signature on federal financial documents, and risked my immediate family's entire financial security while my husband was still alive. Terrence had clearly discovered the fraud during the due diligence phase of his algorithm sale. He was quietly compiling the evidence to confront them, or perhaps he was preparing to hand the entire dossier over to federal authorities. He had taped the key under his desk to ensure that if anything ever happened to him, I would find the absolute truth about my father and my brother. I sat in the silent, temperature-controlled room, surrounded by hundreds of millions of dollars in wealth and irrefutable proof of federal wire fraud and felony forgery. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with sickening crystal clarity. This was exactly why Trevon had shown up at my house 3 days after I buried my babies, aggressively demanding $200,000 from Terrence's life insurance. His creditors were closing in on the $18 million debt. Trevon did not know Terrence had already sold the algorithm and legally shielded the money in a blind trust. Trevon falsely believed the collateral was still viable, but he needed a massive cash injection immediately to stop the private equity firm from auditing the fraudulent loan documents. My parents had skipped the funeral of my husband and my 4 beautiful children because they were too busy popping champagne in a VIP lounge for Trevon's birthday. They had called me a selfish, hysterical widow when I refused to empty my bank accounts for them. They had abandoned me in my darkest, most agonizing hour. And all along, behind their designer clothes and country club smiles, they had been actively stealing from my family to prop up the pathetic illusion of my brother's success. I carefully gathered the documents, organizing them back into their original order, and placed them into the leather portfolios. I did not shed a single tear. The weeping woman who had collapsed in the hospital hallway was gone forever. The obedient daughter who had spent 35 years begging for her parents to simply acknowledge her existence was completely dead. I placed the heavy portfolios into my leather tote bag, locked the empty metal box, and walked out of the bank vault. The sunlight hitting the Atlanta pavement felt different now. I had a $350 million arsenal at my disposal, and I held the exact blueprints to my family's financial destruction. I was going to use every single cent of my husband's legacy to burn their entire world to the absolute ground. I stepped out of First Fidelity Bank into the glaring afternoon sunlight of Midtown Atlanta. The heavy leather portfolios inside my tote bag weighed against my shoulder, but they did not feel like a burden. They felt like a loaded weapon. Terrence had reached from beyond the grave to place the exact tools of my vindication right into my hands. I walked to my car, my mind operating with a cold, terrifying clarity. I was no longer a shattered widow, desperately seeking comfort from a family that despised me. I was a forensic accountant staring at a severely unbalanced ledger, and I was about to audit my entire bloodline. Before I could even start the engine, my cell phone began to vibrate in the cup holder. The caller identification showed Patrice. Patrice was a prominent event planner in our community, and one of the very few genuine friends who had actually attended the funeral to mourn my husband and my 4 beautiful children. I answered the call, fully expecting her usual gentle check-in to see if I had eaten today. Instead, her voice came through the speaker, hushed, frantic, and vibrating with absolute outrage. Alia Patrice said, her breath catching as she spoke. I am so sorry to call you with this right now, but you need to know what your parents are doing. I am sitting in the ladies' lounge at the Oakwood Country Club, and your mother is holding court in the main dining room. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The Oakwood Country Club was the epicenter of elite African American society in Atlanta. It was where Desmond and Valerie spent their weekends networking, gossiping, and projecting their flawless, wealthy image. Tell me exactly what she is saying, I replied, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Patrice hesitated, clearly pained to repeat the words. She is telling everyone that you had a complete, violent, psychotic break. She is saying that Terrence was secretly planning to divorce you before the crash because you were dangerously unstable. Alia, they are telling everyone that you banned the entire family from the funeral out of sheer spite, and that you even hired armed security to keep your own parents away from their grandchildren's caskets. I closed my eyes, letting the sheer magnitude of their deception wash over me. They had skipped the funeral to drink champagne at a nightclub for Trevin's birthday, and now they were actively assassinating my character to cover their tracks. But the smear campaign did not end there. Trevin and Chloe are here too, Patrice continued, her voice dropping to a furious whisper. Chloe is walking around telling the investors that you are hoarding Terrence's modest life insurance payout out of pure greed. She actually had the nerve to say you refuse to help Trevin's business because you want to keep all the money to fund your new single lifestyle. They are painting you as a greedy, hysterical monster to justify why they are not supporting you. Aaliyah, they are trying to ruin your reputation before you even step foot back into society. I sat in the quiet of my car, listening to the hum of the air conditioning. A normal person would have broken down. A normal grieving mother would have screamed, cried, or driven straight to that country club to confront them in front of all their wealthy friends. But I did not shed a single tear. The woman who would have wept at her parents' cruelty died on that overpass with her family. Thank you for telling me, Patrice, I said calmly. Let them talk. Do not defend me. Do not say a word to correct them. Just let them keep spinning their web. Patrice sounded thoroughly confused, but she promised to keep quiet. I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. My family was executing a textbook public relations crisis strategy. By framing me as an unstable, greedy villain, they perfectly insulated themselves from any social backlash regarding their absence at the funeral. They were preparing the ground to isolate me completely, ensuring that when they eventually stole whatever modest assets they believed I possessed, the community would turn a blind eye. They thought I was weak. They thought I was defenseless. They had absolutely no idea that I was currently holding a portfolio containing proof of my anonymous $350 million trust, or that I possessed the highly illegal forged commercial loan documents bearing my dead husband's stolen signature. I drove straight back to my empty house, locked the front door, and marched directly into Terrence's home office. I spread the contents of the first portfolio across his large oak desk. I found the contact information for the lead wealth manager assigned to the blind trust. His name was Harrison Cole, a senior partner at an ultra-exclusive financial management firm that catered only to the profoundly wealthy. I dialed his direct line. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Harrison Cole speaking. Mr. I said, my voice steady and commanding. My name is Aaliyah. I am the sole beneficiary of the blind trust established by Terrence. I have the authentication passcodes. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. The professional detachment in his voice immediately dissolved into deep, genuine respect. Aaliyah Harrison said softly, "We have been waiting for your call. Please allow me to express my most profound condolences for your unimaginable loss." Terrence was an exceptional man and a brilliant mind. We were completely devastated by the news, but we were legally bound by the trust parameters to wait for you to initiate contact. "I appreciate your discretion, Harrison," I replied, staring at the walls of the office my husband had built for us. "I need to confirm the current status of the trust and my level of access to the capital." Harrison did not hesitate. "The funds from the algorithm acquisition cleared completely 3 weeks ago. The trust holds $350 million in liquid capital, fully shielded and entirely anonymous. As the sole beneficiary, you have absolute and uncontested control over every single cent. No one knows it exists, and no one can trace it back to you. How would you like us to proceed?" I pulled the second leather portfolio toward me, the one detailing the financial ruin of my brother Trevon and the federal wire fraud committed by my father Desmond. I opened it to the page detailing the massive $18 million commercial bridge loan that Trevon had secured using my husband's stolen intellectual property. I found the name of the predatory private equity firm based in Chicago that held the debt. "Harrison, I am not calling just to secure my funds," I said, tracing my finger over the forged signature my father had facilitated. "I need you to execute a highly specific, extremely quiet corporate acquisition on my behalf." "I am listening," Harrison replied, his tone shifting into pure business mode. I read him the name of the Chicago private equity firm. This firm currently holds an $18 million commercial debt portfolio belonging to a luxury real estate brokerage here in Atlanta. I want my anonymous trust to purchase that specific debt portfolio immediately. Offer them whatever premium is required to close the deal by the end of the week. Do not just buy the debt if you have to buy a controlling stake in the firm itself. I want to become the ultimate, undisputed creditor of that real estate brokerage, and I want the entire transaction buried under so many non-disclosure agreements that no one will ever know who holds the paper. Harrison paused, clearly absorbing the aggressive and highly unusual nature of my request. "Alia purchasing distressed commercial debt is a highly irregular move for a wealth preservation trust. May I ask what the objective is here?" "The objective, Harrison, is total leverage," I answered, my eyes locked on a framed photograph of my 4 beautiful children smiling on a beach. "The people who own that real estate brokerage committed felony forgery to secure that loan. They stole my husband's intellectual property. They are also my father and my brother. They currently believe I am a helpless, penniless widow whom they can abuse and discard without consequence. I am going to let them believe that until the exact moment I spring the trap." I could hear the faint sound of Harrison typing rapidly on his keyboard. The shock had cleared from his voice, replaced by the sharp, eager compliance of a man who understood the assignment. "Consider it done, Aaliyah. We have the capital to buy the entire Chicago firm twice over if necessary. The debt portfolio will be legally transferred to your anonymous holdings within 5 business days. The current debtors will simply be notified of a standard corporate restructuring. They will have absolutely no idea that you are the one holding the leash." "Thank you, Harrison," I said. "I will be in touch." I ended the call and set the phone down on the desk. Outside, the evening sun was beginning to set over Atlanta, casting long, dark shadows across the front lawn of my quiet, empty house. My family was out there right now, sitting in their country clubs, sipping their expensive wine and telling the world that I was a crazy, greedy woman who had lost her mind. They were resting easy, confident in their delusion that they had successfully gotten away with stealing my husband's legacy and abandoning his grieving widow. They thought they had buried me. They had no idea I was the one holding the shovel. I was going to play the long game. I would become exactly what they claimed I was. I would let them watch me struggle, let them feel superior, let them grow bold and sloppy in their arrogance. And then when they least expected it, I would tighten the financial noose they had so willingly placed around their own necks. I closed the leather portfolio, the satisfying snap of the clasp echoing in the silent room. The smear campaign was their opening move, but they were playing checkers, and I was holding all the pieces to a game they did not even know had begun. I turned off the light in Terrence's office, stepping out into the dark hallway, ready to play the role of the broken widow until the perfect moment arrived. 6 months is exactly how long it takes to construct a flawless illusion. As a forensic accountant, I know that the most successful frauds rely entirely on what the target expects to see. My family expected to see a shattered, destitute widow incapable of functioning without her husband. So I gave them a masterpiece of misery. I started by quietly transferring the deed of my beautiful sunlit suburban home into an anonymous holding company managed by Harrison Cole. To the public, and more importantly to my parents, it appeared as though I had been forced into a desperate short sale to avoid foreclosure. I packed my life into cardboard boxes and moved into a cramped, noisy two-bedroom apartment in a decaying building on the outskirts of the city. I traded my reliable SUV for a 12-year-old sedan with a rattling muffler peeling paint and a transmission that whined loudly every time I shifted gears. I sold my tailored suits and designer bags through an online consignment shop, replacing my wardrobe with faded, oversized clothes that made me look hollow and exhausted. I stopped visiting the salon. I allowed the dark circles under my eyes to deepen. When I occasionally ran into mutual acquaintances at the grocery store, I perfected a fragile, trembling smile and spoke in a quiet, defeated whisper. The performance worked brilliantly. Word quickly filtered back to my parents that Aaliyah had completely given up. Behind the closed doors of my dingy apartment, however, I was running an empire. Harrison Cole and his team of elite financial attorneys had executed my orders with lethal precision. My anonymous trust had successfully acquired the Chicago private equity firm. I was now the sole undisputed owner of Trevon's $18 million commercial debt. Through Harrison, I instructed the firm to grant Trevon a temporary, highly unusual grace period on his defaulted payments. I needed my brother to feel a false sense of security. I needed him to believe that his business was miraculously saved by a benevolent, silent corporate overlord. I wanted his arrogance to inflate to maximum capacity before I dropped the anvil. The invitation for Thanksgiving dinner arrived exactly as I anticipated. It was not a phone call, it was a brief, sterile text message from my mother, Valerie. She did not ask how I was coping with my first major holiday without Terrence and my 4 children. The message simply read, "Pastor Hughes and the board members from the country club are joining us for dinner on Thursday. It would reflect poorly on the family if you sat alone in your apartment. Wear something presentable. Arrive by 4. They did not want their grieving daughter. They wanted a prop. They needed me there to demonstrate their boundless Christian charity to their wealthy friends. When I pulled my rattling rusted sedan up the winding manicured driveway of my parents' sprawling Buckhead estate, the valet visibly sneered. He hesitated to take my keys, likely afraid the engine would die on the way to the parking area. I stepped out of the car wearing a plain, slightly wrinkled gray dress. I wore no makeup. My hands were bare, my wedding ring secured safely in a bank vault downtown, alongside my $350 million trust documents. The moment I walked through the massive double doors of the estate, the scent of roasted turkey, expensive spices, and fresh floral arrangements hit me. The foyer was buzzing with Atlanta's elite African-American socialites. Women in stunning silk dresses and men in custom-tailored suits held crystal glasses of champagne, laughing and networking. I stood in the entryway playing my role. I hunched my shoulders, keeping my gaze fixed on the polished marble floor. "Oh, Aaliyah, you actually came." I looked up to see Chloe Trevon's entitled white wife descending the grand staircase. She was wearing a sparkling emerald gown that probably cost more than the annual rent of my fake apartment. She held a crystal flute of champagne, looking me up and down with an expression of profound distaste. "You look so tired," Chloe noted, her voice carrying loudly enough for several nearby guests to turn and stare. "And that dress? Well, I suppose you do not have much of a reason to dress up these days. Come on, everyone is seating themselves in the formal dining room. Try not to bring the mood down." I followed her in silence. The dining room table was a masterpiece of excess. sterling silver cutlery towering crystal candelabras, and perfectly arranged silk napkins. Desmond sat at the head of the table holding court with Pastor Hughes and two prominent real estate investors. Valerie was directing the catering staff with sharp, imperious gestures. Trevon sat near the center, sweating slightly despite the aggressive air conditioning. I took the only empty seat at the far end of the table near the kitchen doors. As the multi-course meal was served, the conversation flowed smoothly around me, completely ignoring my presence. Trevin was boasting loudly to the investors about his firm. "We are entering a massive phase of restructuring and expansion," Trevon announced, swirling the expensive red wine in his glass. "We recently caught the attention of a major private equity group out of Chicago. They bought out our previous lenders and offered us an incredibly generous grace period to reorganize our capital. They clearly recognize the genius of my business model. It is only a matter of time before we dominate the commercial sector." I took a slow sip of my tap water. Looking at my brother, I saw exactly what he was. A terrified, incompetent fraud wearing a $5,000 suit. He was bragging about the financial noose I had personally tied around his neck. He actually believed his own delusion. The dinner progressed to the main course. The room was loud with laughter and clinking silverware. Then Chloe tapped her manicured fingernail against her crystal glass, producing a sharp ringing sound that immediately drew the attention of the entire table. The conversations halted. Pastor Hughes looked over with a polite, expectant smile. "Everyone." Chloe began standing up slightly from her chair to ensure she commanded the room. "Trevor and I have an announcement. We have been so blessed this year, and we feel it is our duty to give back to those who are struggling, especially family." My stomach tightened. I recognized the predatory gleam in Chloe's eyes. She turned her gaze directly down the length of the table to where I sat silently. "Alia, we know things have been incredibly hard for you since you lost the house," Chloe said, her voice dripping with artificial syrupy sweetness. "We know you are struggling to make ends meet in that tiny little apartment, and we know you have not been able to find a real job since the accident. You have just been trapped in this terrible rut." The wealthy guests shifted uncomfortably in their high-backed chairs. Pastor Hughes offered me a look of deep, condescending pity. "So Trevon and I discussed it." Chloe continued, projecting her voice so the catering staff in the hallway could hear. "And we want to offer you a position at his firm. It is an entry-level role, of course. Mostly fetching coffee, handling the reception desk, and organizing the mailroom. It only pays minimum wage, but it will get you out of the house. You cannot just live off whatever pennies Terrence left behind forever. You need to pull yourself together and rejoin society." The sheer breathtaking audacity of the offer hung in the air. She was using a holiday dinner surrounded by my parents' influential friends to publicly humiliate me. She was offering a woman with a master's degree in forensic accounting a minimum wage job fetching coffee for a brother who had committed federal wire fraud using my dead husband's stolen intellectual property. I kept my hands folded neatly in my lap. I did not flinch. I did not glare. I maintained the perfect hollow expression of a broken woman. I waited for my parents to intervene. I waited for Desmond or Valerie to remind Chloe that I was a highly educated professional. But of course, the intervention never came. Instead, the ultimate betrayal unfolded exactly as I knew it would. Valerie sighed loudly from her position near the head of the table. She placed a perfectly manicured hand over her heart, performing for the investors and the pastor. "Chloe is right, Aaliyah," my mother said, her tone sharp and completely devoid of actual maternal warmth. "It is a very generous offer, and you should be extremely grateful. It is a tragedy what happened to Terrence and the children, but you have always lacked Trevon's natural resilience. You have let this tragedy completely define you. You have become a profound disappointment to this family over the last 6 months. We just want you to be a productive member of society again, instead of wallowing in your own misery." Desmond nodded in solemn agreement, taking a sip of his wine. "Your mother is right. Take the job, Aaliyah. Learn how a real business operates. Trevon can teach you a thing or two about success." The entire table stared at me, waiting for my response. They expected tears. They expected me to lower my head in shame and accept the humiliating charity they were weaponizing against me to boost their own public image. I looked at Chloe, oblivious to her husband's impending federal indictment. I looked at Trevon sweating through his custom suit, entirely dependent on a silent investor he did not realize was sitting right across from him. I looked at Valerie and Desmond, two people who had abandoned me in a hospital hallway and actively facilitated the theft of my family's legacy. I am a forensic accountant. I do not see family when I look at them. I see numbers. I see liabilities. I see a debt that is about to be collected in full. I offered a quiet, fragile smile. Thank you for your concern, Chloe. It is very thoughtful. I picked up my fork and took a small bite of turkey. It tasted like ash, but I swallowed it smoothly. The trap was set. The jaws were wide open, and my family had just stepped directly into the center of the snare. The tension at the dining table evaporated the moment I swallowed that dry bite of turkey and offered my quiet smile. To the wealthy guests, to Pastor Hughes, and especially to my family, my silence was the ultimate confirmation of my submission. I watched the triumphant smirk spread across Chloe's pale face. I saw my brother Trayvon lean back in his custom-tailored suit, practically glowing with the satisfaction of knowing his older, smarter sister had been publicly reduced to a beggar. My mother Valerie immediately signaled the catering staff to clear the plates, eager to steer the conversation back to their upcoming winter vacation to St. Bart's. I sat there for exactly 20 minutes. I listened to the clinking of expensive crystal and the low, arrogant hum of men discussing golf handicaps and real estate acquisitions. I needed them to feel completely comfortable. I needed them to believe they had broken me so thoroughly that I would accept whatever scraps they threw in my direction. When the dessert plates were being distributed, I slowly stood up from my chair at the far end of the table. I kept my shoulders slumped and my gaze fixed firmly on the floor. I walked around the perimeter of the dining room until I reached the head of the table where my father sat. I leaned down, making sure my voice trembled just enough to convey absolute terror. "Dad," I whispered, my voice wavering perfectly. "Can I speak to you in private for a moment? It is an emergency." Desmond frowned, clearly irritated by the interruption, but he noticed the manufactured panic in my eyes. He offered a polite excuse to Pastor Hughes and the investors, dabbing his mouth with a silk napkin before standing up. He gestured for me to follow him. I walked behind him as he led me out of the bright, echoing dining room and into the darkened corridor near his home office. The heavy oak doors muffled the sound of the dinner party, leaving us in a heavy, suffocating silence. The hallway smelled of expensive cologne and old money. "What is it?" Aaliyah, Desmond asked, crossing his arms over his chest. His tone was not paternal. It was the sharp, impatient tone of a CEO dealing with an incompetent employee. "We have guests. Make this quick." I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering as if I were freezing. I let a single tear pool in my eye and spill over my cheek. "Dad, I got a terrifying phone call today." I stammered, my breathing quick and shallow. "A debt collection agency called me. They said they were calling from Chicago. They told me Terrence signed a commercial loan guarantee for $18 million. They said his intellectual property was used as collateral." "Dad, I am so scared." "Terrence never signed anything like that. He would have told me. I think someone stole his identity. I need your help." The transformation in my father was instantaneous and terrifying. The polished, jovial host who had just been laughing over expensive wine completely vanished. His spine stiffened, his jaw locked. The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop 10 degrees as the mask of the respectable patriarch slid off, revealing the ruthless, calculating predator beneath. He did not gasp in shock. He did not ask for the name of the collection agency. He did not offer to call the police to report the identity theft of his dead son-in-law. Instead, Desmond took a step forward, using his massive physical presence to back me directly into the dark corner of the hallway. He stepped so close that I could smell the heavy red wine on his breath. He raised his hand and slammed his palm flat against the oak wall right beside my head, trapping me. "You listen to me very carefully, Aaliyah." Desmond hissed, his voice dropping to a vicious, guttural whisper. "You are going to forget you ever received that phone call. You are going to block that number, and if they ever call you again, you will hang up immediately. Do you understand me?" I widened my eyes, letting my jaw tremble. "But Dad, it is fraud. Terrence did not sign it. The signature was forged. I have to call the authorities. I have to protect his estate. Desmond leaned in closer, his eyes cold and dead. Terrence is dead. His estate is a pile of ashes and a life insurance policy that barely covers a modest mortgage. You think you are the first person in the world to encounter a forged signature. You think the authorities care about a grieving widow complaining about commercial loans. He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. Let me make this crystal clear for you. If you ever breathe a word of this to anyone, if you ever try to contact a lawyer or the police about that signature, I will personally destroy you. I have lawyers on retainer who cost more by the hour than you will earn in a lifetime fetching coffee for my son. I will bury you in endless litigation. I will tie up whatever pathetic little life insurance payout you received until you cannot even afford to pay the rent on that miserable apartment of yours. I stared up at the man who had given me life. I looked into the eyes of the man who was supposed to protect me when my husband and 4 children were killed. There was no love there. There was no remorse. There was only the brutal, unapologetic arrogance of a man who believed his wealth made him a god. He had forged Terrence's signature. He had risked my family's entire financial security to save Trayvon, and he was perfectly willing to crush me into the dirt to keep his secret safe. I will drag your name through the mud of every social circle in Atlanta. Desmond threatened, his grip tightening on my arm. You will be blacklisted. You will be unemployable. You will end up living on the streets, and I will make sure no one in this family ever throws you a single dime. You have nothing, Aaliyah. Know your place. He shoved my arm away, stepping back and smoothing the lapels of his custom suit. He adjusted his tie, his breathing completely calm. The threat was delivered with the casual ease of a man swatting away an annoying insect. Dry your face, Desmond commanded, pointing a finger at me. Go back into that dining room, thank your sister-in-law for her incredible generosity, and accept the job. You are a Blackwell. Start acting like you understand how the real world works. He turned his back on me and walked confidently down the hallway, pushing open the heavy oak doors and instantly returning to the loud, joyous atmosphere of the Thanksgiving dinner. I heard his booming laugh echo through the house as he rejoined Pastor Hughes. I remained in the dark corridor for a full minute. I did not cry. My heart was not racing. My pulse was as steady and rhythmic as a ticking clock. The audit was complete. I had given my father one final desperate opportunity to show a shred of humanity, to show even a fraction of guilt for stealing my dead husband's legacy. Instead, he had threatened to leave me homeless. He had given me the absolute moral clearance to execute his destruction without a single ounce of hesitation. I smoothed the front of my wrinkled gray dress. I wiped the single manufactured tear from my cheek. I squared my shoulders and walked back into the bright, glittering dining room. The guests were finishing their desserts. Chloe was laughing loudly at something Trevin had said, her emerald gown catching the light of the crystal candelabras. Valerie looked up as I approached the table, her eyes narrowing as she assessed my demeanor to ensure I had been properly disciplined by my father. Alia, Chloe said, swirling her champagne glass. We were just finalizing the details for your new position at Trevon's firm. I think having you start on Monday would be best. You can organize the supply closet to ease your way into the workflow. The entire table paused, waiting for my grateful acceptance. Desmond watched me from the head of the table, his eyes locked on mine, a silent warning broadcasting loud and clear across the room. I stood behind my empty chair. I looked directly at Chloe, and then I looked at Trevon. I let a perfectly calm, polite smile spread across my face. I appreciate the offer, Chloe. I said, my voice clear, professional, and carrying beautifully across the quiet room. It is quite revealing of your character to offer such a position. However, I am going to have to decline. I have other arrangements to pursue. The shock that rippled across the table was palpable. Chloe's smug smile instantly vanished, her mouth falling slightly open in pure indignation. Trevin sat up straight, his face flushing dark red. Valerie dropped her silver dessert spoon onto her china plate with a loud clatter. Excuse me, Chloe snapped, her voice shrill. I did not give them the satisfaction of an argument. I did not wait for Desmond to explode or for Valerie to berate me in front of the pastor. I simply offered a polite nod to the guests. Thank you for the meal, I said calmly. Happy Thanksgiving. I turned my back on my family and walked purposefully out of the dining room. I did not run. I did not rush. I walked through the grand foyer with the steady, measured pace of a woman who owns the very ground she walks on. I pulled open the heavy front doors and stepped out into the freezing November night. The crisp, biting air hit my face, clearing the stench of their expensive perfumes and roasted food from my lungs. The valet rushed forward looking confused as he hurried to retrieve my rusted 12-year-old sedan. He pulled the rattling car up to the front steps, leaving the engine running. I handed him a $5 bill, slid into the cold driver's seat and closed the door. The heater in the old car was broken. The steering wheel was freezing against my bare hands. I sat in the darkness of the driveway, staring up at the massive illuminated windows of my parents' sprawling estate. I could see the silhouettes of my family moving frantically in the dining room, undoubtedly tearing my name to shreds, outraged by my quiet defiance. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I opened the encrypted messaging application connected directly to Harrison Cole's private server. The screen glowed brightly in the dark cabin of the car. My thumb hovered over the digital keyboard for only a second before I began to type. Execute the acquisition. Call in the loans immediately. I hit send. The message vanished into the digital ether, traveling instantly to the elite wealth management firm, waiting on standby. There was no turning back. The $18 million debt holding, Trevon's business together, was now entirely in my hands, and I had just ripped the safety net out from under them. I put the car into gear, the old transmission whining loudly as I pulled out of the gates of the Oakwood estate. I drove off into the cold Atlanta night, leaving my family completely oblivious to the catastrophic financial avalanche that was already crashing down toward their heads. 365 days. Exactly 1 year has passed since the cold and sterile hospital hallway, where my entire universe was reduced to a charred wedding band in a plastic evidence bag. This morning I woke up before the sun began to rise. I drove to the quiet cemetery on the outskirts of Atlanta. I stood before the 5 pristine headstones that bear the names of my husband Terrence and my 4 beautiful babies, Jamari, Kayla, Isaiah, and Jordan. I placed fresh white roses on the damp grass. I stood in the freezing morning mist and spoke quietly to my family, promising them that today would be the day the ledger is finally balanced. Today is the day I balance the scales of justice. For any normal family, the first anniversary of such a catastrophic loss is a day of quiet reflection. It is a day of shared mourning and profound remembrance. But I do not have a normal family. I have parasites. Today, on the exact anniversary of the day, my family was wiped out. My brother Trevon is hosting a massive and opulent rebranding gala for his luxury real estate firm. The sheer level of narcissism required to choose this specific date is almost difficult to comprehend. He and my parents did not just ignore the anniversary of my family dying, they actively paved over it with a red carpet and open bar. Trevon wants to celebrate his supposedly booming empire. High is eager to show off his success to Atlanta high society and his wealthy investors. He has absolutely no idea that the money funding his lavish celebration is borrowed against my dead husband's stolen intellectual property. And he definitely does not know that his silent and anonymous creditor is the very sister he left to drown in her own grief. For the past 6 months, ever since that Thanksgiving dinner, where they threatened to leave me homeless, I played the role of the destitute and broken widow to absolute perfection. I wore faded, oversized clothes. I drove my rattling, unreliable car. I kept my head bowed in submission whenever I was forced to interact with them. I let them offer me degrading minimum wage jobs and threaten me in dark hallways. I let them believe they had completely broken my spirit. But tonight, the performance changes forever. The trap has been meticulously set. The corporate acquisitions are complete. The financial snare is pulled completely tight. I am no longer hiding in the background waiting for their permission to exist. I stand in front of the full-length mirror in my modest apartment, staring at the woman looking back at me. I am wearing a custom-tailored floor-length black morning gown. The fabric is heavy, luxurious silk wrapping around my figure with an elegant and severe precision. It is a dress that commands absolute respect. It is a dress that forces anyone who looks at me to remember exactly what I have lost and exactly who they are dealing with. I pair it with simple diamond studs that Terrence gave me for our 5th anniversary. I apply my makeup flawlessly, highlighting the sharp angles of my face. I do not look broken anymore. I look dangerous. I look like a wrecking. I drive a rented inconspicuous town car to the Grand Georgian Hotel in downtown Atlanta, where Trevon has rented the main ballroom. The venue is famously expensive and a favorite gathering place among the city elite, African American business owners. I walk through the gilded lobby, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floor. 2 large security guards stand at the entrance to the ballroom, holding a digital guest list on a tablet. I do not slow my pace. I look the closest guard directly in the eyes with a calm and unwavering authority that wealthy people are taught to recognize instantly. I am Trevon's sister, I say smoothly. My name is Aliyah. I am family. The guard hesitates for the fraction of a second. He looks at my severe black gown and my confident posture. Then he steps aside and pulls open the heavy brass doors for me without checking the tablet. The ballroom is a blinding display of stolen wealth. Massive crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over dozens of round tables draped in crisp white silk. A live jazz band plays upbeat music on a raised stage surrounded by towering floral arrangements of white hydrangeas and orchids. Waiters in crisp uniforms weave through the thick crowd, carrying silver trays of expensive appetizers and pouring endless flutes of sparkling champagne. Hundreds of guests are laughing, drinking, and celebrating my brother's fraudulent empire. I step inside the room and stop. The heavy black silk of my morning gown stands out like a dark void against the glittering and colorful dresses of the socialites. I do not move. I simply stand near the entrance, a silent and imposing monument to the family they are all trying so desperately to forget. Slowly, the people nearest to the doors notice me. The loud laughter in my immediate vicinity falters. The cheerful conversation trails off into uncomfortable, heavy whispers. The silence spreads through the room like a ripple in a pond. Guests turn their heads, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their mouths. They are staring at the grieving widow who has dared to bring the physical embodiment of death into their joyous party. It takes less than 2 minutes for the disruption to catch the attention of the hosts. Through the thick crowd, I see Chloe Trevon's entitled white wife power walking toward me. She is wearing a sequined silver gown that flashes aggressively under the bright chandeliers. Her face is flushed dark red with pure and unfiltered rage. She does not offer a polite greeting. She does not offer condolences on the terrible anniversary of my unimaginable loss. She marches right up to me and grabs my upper arm. Her manicured acrylic nails dig painfully into the black silk of my dress. "What are you doing here?" Chloe hisses. Her voice is a frantic and breathless whisper as she attempts to physically drag me out of the line of sight of the wealthy guests. "You are not on the guest list, Aliyah. You cannot just show up here looking like a professional mourner. You are completely ruining the aesthetic of the entire evening." I look down at the hand gripping my arm. I do not pull away, but I fix her with a stare so cold and empty that she instinctively loosens her tight grip. "I came to support my brother on this very important day," I reply, my voice perfectly level. "Is family not allowed to celebrate family?" Chloe scoffs, looking around nervously to see who is watching us. "You are not here to celebrate," she snaps. "You are here to make everyone feel sorry for you. Do you have any idea how much money Trayvon spent on this gala today? We have top-tier private equity investors in this room right now. We have city council members. We are trying to project success and wealth to the Atlanta business community. And you are standing here like a walking rain cloud depressing the investors. I cannot have you wandering around the ballroom telling people your sob story and ruining the vibe." I watch the panic dancing behind her pale blue eyes. She is terrified that my presence will shatter the delicate illusion of their perfect and successful life. She is terrified that the investors will ask uncomfortable questions about my dead husband and his software company. "If you are going to stay," Chloe commands. She points a shaking finger toward the far back wall of the massive ballroom. "You are going to sit at table 42. It is in the back, right next to the kitchen doors, where the catering staff goes in and out. You are going to sit there quietly. You are not going to mingle with anyone, and you are absolutely not going to speak to anyone important. Do you understand me? I look toward the back of the massive room. Table 42 is tucked away in the deep shadows. It is partially obscured by a large floral arrangement and sits directly in the noisy and chaotic traffic path of the busy waitstaff. It is a table specifically designed for people you want to hide. It is the ultimate insult. It is a clear and deliberate message that I am an embarrassment to be tucked away out of sight so my family can shine. I look back at Chloe. Her chest is heaving and her eyes are wide with desperate authority. She thinks she has won. She thinks she is putting me in my place. A small and genuine smile tugs at the corner of my mouth. It is a smile she completely misinterprets as broken submission. Of course, Chloe, I say softly. I understand perfectly. I will sit in the back. I do not want to draw any unnecessary attention tonight. I turn and walk away from her, navigating through the sea of staring guests. I keep my head held high and my posture immaculate. I reach table 42 and take a seat in the dark shadows. The swinging kitchen doors bang open and shut beside me. The loud noise of clattering dishes and shouting chefs spills out into the elegant ballroom. It does not bother me at all. I sit perfectly still in the dim lighting, smoothing the black silk over my knees. I fold my hands quietly in my lap. I am exactly where I want to be. I am the invisible spectator. I am the overlooked sister. I am the forgotten widow. And from this hidden vantage point in the shadows, I have a perfect view of the entire room. I am waiting patiently to watch their glittering world burn to the ground. The view from table 42 is exactly as Chloe intended. It is a masterpiece of exclusion. I am tucked so far into the back corner of the grand Georgian ballroom that the massive crystal chandeliers overhead do not even reach me. I am sitting in the heavy shifting shadows of the kitchen doors. Every few seconds, a waiter rushes past my shoulder carrying trays of empty champagne flutes and half-eaten plates of roasted duck and truffle risotto. The smell of industrial dish soap and discarded food wafts over my table, a stark contrast to the expensive floral arrangements perfuming the rest of the room. I do not mind the shadows. Predators prefer the dark. I take a slow sip of my sparkling water, letting the cold liquid ground me. From this vantage point, I can see every single person in the room without them seeing me. I watch Atlanta's elite African-American business owners, politicians, and socialites mingling in their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. They are completely oblivious to the financial slaughterhouse they are currently standing inside. They are drinking top-shelf liquor paid for by stolen intellectual property. They are celebrating a luxury real estate empire that is entirely built on a foundation of federal wire fraud. Suddenly, the upbeat jazz music fades out. The low rumbling hum of hundreds of wealthy guests talking over one another begins to quiet down. At the very front of the ballroom, the bright stage lights illuminate. A microphone provides a brief, sharp squeal of feedback that echoes across the cavernous room. My father Desmond steps up to the podium. He is wearing a custom velvet tuxedo jacket that costs more than what some families make in an entire year. His silver hair is immaculately faded, and his posture radiates the absolute undeniable arrogance of a man who believes he is completely untouchable. Beside him stands my brother Trevon, the golden boy, wearing a smug, practiced smile. My mother Valerie and my sister-in-law Chloe stand just a few feet away, their faces arranged into expressions of perfect, adoring support. Good evening, distinguished guests, friends, and esteemed colleagues. Desmond begins. His deep, booming voice rolls over the silent crowd. The acoustics of the ballroom make him sound larger than life. Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate a monumental milestone for our family and for our business. Tonight is not just a rebranding gala for Trevon's real estate firm. Tonight is a celebration of resilience. It is a celebration of vision of generational wealth and of the unbreakable strength of the Blackwell legacy. The crowd breaks into polite, enthusiastic applause. Desmond smiles, holding up a hand to quiet them. He knows exactly how to work a room. He knows exactly how to play the role of the benevolent, successful patriarch. I watch him closely, tracking the subtle movements of his hands gripping the edges of the podium. I am auditing his performance. This past year has brought unprecedented growth to our firm. Desmond continues, his chest puffing out with manufactured pride. We have secured massive investments. We have restructured our capital with the backing of highly exclusive private equity partners out of Chicago. We have positioned ourselves to completely dominate the commercial real estate sector in this great city. We are officially entering a golden era of wealth for our family. I take another sip of my water. A golden era of wealth. He is bragging about the $18 million commercial debt portfolio that my anonymous trust currently owns. He is standing in front of the most powerful people in Atlanta publicly boasting about the fraudulent loan he secured by forging my dead husband's signature. The sheer breathtaking delusion required to stand on that stage and call felony wire fraud a golden era of wealth is almost pathological. But Desmond is not finished. He adjusts his microphone, and I watch his facial expression shift perfectly on cue. The arrogant, booming CEO vanishes. In his place is the solemn, strong father figure. He lowers his head slightly, letting a heavy, dramatic silence fall over the ballroom. As we look toward this bright future, Desmond says, his voice dropping into a somber, gravelly register, "We must also acknowledge the difficult road that brought us here." My grip tightens on my glass. As many of you know exactly, 1 year ago today, our family faced an unimaginable tragedy. Desmond continues. The room goes dead silent. You could hear a pin drop on the marble floor. We were struck by a devastating sudden loss. It was the kind of dark time that would have broken a lesser family. It was a storm that threatened to tear our entire world apart. He does not say Terrence's name. He does not say Jamari, Kayla, Isaiah, or Jordan. He reduces my husband and my 4 beautiful children to a vague, nameless tragedy. He packages the absolute slaughter of my entire universe into a convenient PR talking point. I see Valerie dab the corner of her eye with a lace handkerchief, performing her grief perfectly for the investors seated in the front row. Chloe places a supportive hand on Trevin's back. But we did not break. Desmond booms, his voice rising with theatrical triumph. He turns and places a heavy, proud hand on Trevin's shoulder. Because in that moment of darkness when this family needed strength the most, my son stepped up. Trayvon took the weight of this family on his shoulders. He worked night and day to ensure our legacy was protected. He navigated us through the storm with a business acumen and an emotional fortitude that leaves me entirely in awe. The crowd murmurs in deep, respectful agreement. Trayvon is not just an incredible CEO, Desmond declares, looking out at the wealthy audience. He is the true head of this family. He is the anchor that kept us from washing away. And because of his leadership, we are standing here tonight, stronger, wealthier, and more united than ever before. The insult is so massive, so profoundly cruel, that it almost takes my breath away. My father is standing on a stage on the exact anniversary of the day my children were put into the ground, and he is using their deaths to glorify the brother who stole from them. He is actively rewriting history in front of hundreds of people. He is erasing my existence, erasing my grief, and assigning the role of the tragic hero to a man who demanded a piece of my husband's life insurance 3 days after the funeral. Desmond raises his crystal flute of champagne high into the air. Please raise your glasses, Desmond commands. To Trayvon, to the future, and to the unstoppable success of our family empire. To Trayvon, the crowd echoes in a loud, unified chorus. Hundreds of crystal glasses clink together in the bright, glittering ballroom. The jazz band immediately strikes up a triumphant, upbeat chord. The celebration resumes with a roaring, joyful intensity. I do not raise my glass. I sit in the heavy shadows of table 42, surrounded by the clattering noise of the kitchen. My heart is not racing. I am not crying. The white-hot rage that I felt a year ago has been completely distilled into something pure and absolutely lethal. They have played their final card. They have squeezed every ounce of social currency out of my dead family. They have taken their bow. I reach into my small black clutch and pull out my cell phone. I place the phone flat on the white tablecloth in front of me. I do not look at the stage anymore. I do not look at my father shaking hands with investors or my mother accepting compliments on her dress. I fix my eyes entirely on the bright digital clock glowing on my phone screen. It reads 11:57 p.m. The physical environment around me begins to fade away. The loud jazz music, the smell of roasted meats, the harsh laughter of Chloe echoing from the front of the room. It all turns into white noise. My anonymous trust acquired Trevon's $18 million debt exactly 6 months ago. Through my lead wealth manager, Harrison Cole, I signed the final legal directives yesterday afternoon. I instructed the firm to execute the absolute maximum penalty for breach of contract and fraudulent collateral. I initiated the immediate non-negotiable recall of the entire $18 million loan. But I also placed a strict binding embargo on the public disclosure of the acquisition. I coordinated with Terrence's elite public relations team, the same team that managed the media during the original sale of his software algorithm. We synchronized the release of the financial disclosures with the major business publications. We timed the drop perfectly. The digital clock on my screen changes. It reads 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes. In exactly 120 seconds, the non-disclosure embargo lifts. In 120 seconds, the digital presses of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal will automatically publish their exclusive features. In 120 seconds, the entire financial world, including every single wealthy investor standing in this ballroom, will receive a breaking news alert on their phones. They will read the headline that completely destroys the illusion my father just sold them. They will learn that the anonymous billionaire who just acquired the private equity firm holding Trevon's debt is not a benevolent corporate overlord. They will learn that the creditor who holds the leash to my family's entire existence is the grieving, destitute widow sitting in the shadows by the kitchen doors. I pick up my glass of sparkling water. The ice cubes clink softly against the rim. I take a slow, deliberate sip. I savor the cold, crisp taste on my tongue. I feel the smooth, heavy silk of my morning gown resting against my skin. I am perfectly calm. I am the architect of their ruin, and the countdown has already begun. The clock changes to 11:59 p.m. 60 seconds remain. I keep my eyes locked on the screen, waiting for midnight to strike, waiting for the hammer to finally fall. The final 60 seconds stretch out like a lifetime. I watch the digital numbers on my phone screen glow in the dim light of table 42, anticipating the exact moment my family's entire existence fractures. Across the massive, glittering ballroom, the jazz band hits a lively and triumphant crescendo. Waiters in crisp uniforms are actively pouring the last round of expensive champagne into crystal flutes. My father Desmond is still basking in the false glory of his fraudulent toast. He is aggressively shaking hands with a prominent Atlanta City councilman, flashing his bright manufactured smile. Trevon is laughing loudly, his arm wrapped tightly around Chloe's waist. She is throwing her head back in exaggerated amusement, her silver sequined dress catching the brilliant light of the crystal chandeliers overhead. They are completely and utterly oblivious to the financial guillotine swinging down toward their necks. Then it happens. It does not start with a shout or a scream of panic. It starts with a vibration. Somewhere near the front of the stage, a mobile phone buzzes loudly against a glass cocktail table. A fraction of a second later, another phone buzzes, then 3 more, then 10. Within 10 seconds, the entire Grand Georgian Ballroom is filled with the synchronized mechanical humming of hundreds of cell phones receiving high-priority news alerts simultaneously. The sound is like a swarm of locusts descending upon the room, a low and ominous vibration that cuts directly through the upbeat jazz music. The synchronized notifications are the result of Harrison Cole's flawless execution. The financial world is highly connected, and Atlanta's elite, African-American business community subscribes to the same premium digital news feeds. Forbes and the Wall Street Journal have just pushed their midnight digital exclusives, overriding standard notification settings with a breaking news alert. I watch a wealthy commercial real estate developer, standing near the centerpiece of the room, pull his phone from his custom tuxedo pocket. He glances down at the glowing screen. His polite, easygoing smile instantly vanishes. His brow furrows in deep, unadulterated confusion. He taps the screen to open the full article. The woman standing next to him checks her own phone. She gasps audibly, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. She immediately grabs the arm of her husband and shoves the illuminated screen directly into his line of sight. The headline flashing across hundreds of screens in the ballroom is an absolute masterpiece of aggressive corporate journalism. I had reviewed and approved the final draft myself just yesterday. It reads, Grieving widow Aaliyah Washington revealed as anonymous billionaire buyer. Behind $350 million tech deal. Subsidiary acquires Chicago private equity firm in hostile takeover. The article does not stop at the headline. It details Terrence's genius encryption algorithm and the massive historic payout shielded in a blind trust. It explicitly names the specific Chicago private equity firm that my trust just acquired. It connects every single dot with lethal, undeniable precision. I sit perfectly still in the heavy shadows of Table 42. The swinging kitchen doors behind me have gone completely quiet. Even the catering staff has stopped moving, pulling their phones from their apron pockets to read the breaking news. I take a slow, deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. I can see the exact moment the shockwave hits the front of the room. Desmond is still talking to the city councilman. The councilman looks down at his phone, reads the notification, and his eyes widen in horror. He looks at my father and then he takes a deliberate physical step away from Desmond, severing their conversation immediately. Desmond frowns, deeply confused by the sudden and aggressive coldness. He reaches into his velvet tuxedo jacket and retrieves his own device. At the exact same time, Trevon's phone begins to ring. It is not a subtle news alert vibration. It is the jarring, persistent ringtone of an incoming emergency call. Trevon looks profoundly annoyed at the interruption. He pulls the phone from his pocket, checks the caller identification, and rolls his eyes at Chloe. He mouths the letters CFO to her, indicating it is his chief financial officer calling at midnight. Chloe huffs in dramatic annoyance, crossing her arms defensively as Trevon answers the call. "What is it?" Trevon says. His voice is loud and arrogant, carrying easily over the dying hum of the crowd. "We are in the middle of the gala. I told you not to call unless the building was on fire." I cannot hear the voice on the other end of the line, but I do not need to. I know exactly what his chief financial officer is screaming into the receiver. I orchestrated the entire sequence of events. At this very second, a team of highly aggressive corporate lawyers, retained by Harrison Cole, is flooding Trevon's company email servers with certified legal notices. The private equity firm, which is now wholly owned and operated by my blind trust, has just officially called in the entirety of Trevon's $18 million commercial debt. The generous grace period I deceptively granted them 6 months ago has been immediately and permanently revoked. The legal notices explicitly state that the loan is being called due to catastrophic breach of contract and the confirmed discovery of fraudulent collateral. I watch my brother's face. The physical transformation is spectacular to witness. The smug, arrogant glow of the protected golden child is violently erased. The color drains completely out of his face, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. His jaw drops open, his mouth working silently, as he tries to process the impossible words his CFO is shouting at him. His knees visibly buckle, causing him to sway unsteadily on his feet. He drops his crystal champagne flute. It hits the polished marble floor and shatters into 100 glittering pieces, the expensive liquor splashing aggressively across Chloe's silver designer shoes. "What do you mean? The entire debt is called?" Trevon stammers, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, breathless panic. "What do you mean fraudulent collateral? We have a grace period. They cannot just demand $18 million in the middle of the night. Who bought the firm?" Chloe jumps back to avoid the shattered glass, her face twisting in fury. "Trevon, what are you doing?" she hisses, looking around nervously at the wealthy guests who are now openly staring at them. "You are making a terrible scene. Hang up the phone right now." But Trevon cannot hear her. He is listening to his CFO read the Forbes headline that connects the hostile corporate takeover directly to my name and to Terrence's stolen intellectual property. Trevon's phone slips from his trembling fingers and clatters onto the marble floor next to the broken glass. He turns his head slowly, his wide, terrified eyes seeking out our father. Desmond is already staring back at him. Desmond has just finished reading the Wall Street Journal alert on his own glowing screen. The powerful patriarch of the family, the ruthless man who threatened to leave me homeless in a dark hallway, looks as though he has just been struck by lightning. His breathing is shallow and incredibly rapid. The hand holding his phone is shaking so violently that he has to grip his own wrist with his other hand just to steady it. Valerie finally senses that something is catastrophically wrong. She touches Desmond's arm, asking him a frantic question I cannot hear over the noise of the crowd. Desmond does not answer her. He cannot form the words. He simply hands her the phone. Valerie reads the glowing text. She lets out a sharp, breathless gasp and covers her mouth with both trembling hands, her eyes darting frantically around the rapidly shifting room. The whispers of the elite crowd have now escalated into an undeniable, deafening roar. Hundreds of wealthy investors, socialites, and politicians are actively putting the pieces together. They are looking at the headline on their screens, looking at my family standing in frozen terror at the front of the room, and then slowly they are turning around. Like a massive wave shifting direction in the ocean, the entire ballroom turns to look toward the back wall. They are looking past the towering floral arrangements. They are looking past the busy waitstaff dropping their trays. They are looking directly into the dark shadows of table 42. I do not shrink back. I do not hide my face. I sit perfectly straight in my chair, the heavy black silk of my morning gown pooling elegantly around my legs. I meet their collective stares with eyes as hard and cold as diamonds. I am no longer the pathetic broken widow they were told to pity. I am the apex predator in the room, and I have just locked my jaws firmly around the throat of my family's fraudulent empire. Trevin pushes past Chloe, completely ignoring her confused, shrill demands for an explanation. He stumbles forward, knocking heavily into a cocktail table as he tries to orient himself. His eyes sweep the massive room, frantic and wild, until they finally lock onto me, sitting in the darkness. Alia, Trevin shouts. His voice echoes through the silent ballroom, thick with absolute desperation and terror. He takes a step toward me, but his legs give out again, and he has to lean heavily against a chair to keep from collapsing entirely onto the floor. Desmond pushes his way through the crowd, his custom velvet tuxedo suddenly looking like a ridiculous costume. He is sweating profusely, the moisture glistening on his forehead under the bright lights. He grabs Trayvon by the shoulder, trying to hold his son upright, but Desmond's own eyes are fixed on me with a look of absolute, unadulterated horror. He knows exactly what the fraudulent collateral charge means. He knows that calling in the massive commercial loan is not just a financial ruin. It is the immediate precursor to a federal criminal indictment. He forged Terrence's signature on banking documents across state lines, and he knows with terrifying certainty that I possess the physical receipts. Chloe snatches Trevin's fallen phone off the ground. She reads the screen, her eyes widening until they look like they might pop out of her skull. She looks at me sitting at table 42, the woman she just banished to the kitchen doors, the woman she loudly offered a minimum wage job, fetching coffee, just to humiliate me. Her face contorts into a mask of pure, sickening panic as she realizes she just insulted a billionaire who now owns everything her husband claims to possess. I pick up my glass of sparkling water and take one final leisurely sip. I set the glass down on the crisp, white tablecloth. The long, exhausting time for sitting in the shadows is over. The time for hiding my immense strength just to make them feel powerful is completely finished. I push my chair back and stand up, the black silk of my gown flowing around me like a dark storm cloud. The real confrontation is about to begin, and I am fully prepared to watch their glittering, fake world turn to ashes. The heavy black silk of my gown brushes against the chairs as I stand fully upright at table 42. The entire Grand Georgian ballroom has descended into a breathless, suffocating silence. The jazz band on the stage has stopped playing completely, the musicians lowering their brass instruments as they stare at the unfolding spectacle. Hundreds of Atlanta's most powerful investors, politicians, and socialites are frozen in place, their eyes locked on the back corner of the room. They form a massive, glittering audience for the absolute destruction of my family. Trevon is the first to move. He stumbles forward, pushing blindly through the sea of perfectly tailored tuxedos and designer gowns. The guests immediately step out of his way, parting like the Red Sea, eager to distance themselves from a man whose financial and social execution has just been broadcast to the entire world. Desmond is right behind him, his face shining with a thick layer of nervous sweat. Valerie and Chloe trail after them, their high heels clicking frantically against the polished marble floor. Their walk from the brightly lit stage to the dark shadows of the kitchen doors is the longest walk of their lives. It is a highly public walk of shame, and I savor every single second of it. When they finally reach my table, the arrogant, impenetrable wall of superiority they have worn my entire life is completely shattered. They look like terrified strangers. Desmond attempts to take control first. He is a man who has spent decades manipulating rooms and bending people to his will, and his instincts kick in. He pulls a white silk handkerchief from his pocket and dabs violently at his forehead. He forces a loud, booming laugh that sounds incredibly hollow and unstable in the quiet room. Alia, my father says, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to project authority. This is quite the elaborate prank you have pulled. I have to admit, you really had us going for a second. The news alerts the dramatic timing. It is a very creative misunderstanding. But we should really take this conversation into the private VIP lounge so we do not disturb the guests any further. We can call Harrison Cole and clear up this silly corporate glitch right now. He reaches out to grab my arm, attempting to aggressively guide me toward the back exit, just as he did in the hallway on Thanksgiving. I do not flinch, but I fix him with a stare so venomous and cold that his hand stops mid-air. He slowly lowers his arm, visibly shrinking under my gaze. There is no glitch, Desmond, I say. My voice is perfectly calm, crisp, and loud enough for the first 3 rows of guests to hear clearly. I instructed my wealth management team to acquire the Chicago private equity firm 6 months ago. I am the sole owner of the $18 million commercial debt holding Trevens business together. And as of 3 minutes ago, I officially called the loan. I expect payment in full by tomorrow morning, or I will seize every single asset this family possesses. Trevin lets out a sound that is half sob and half gasp. He grips the edge of the cocktail table, his knuckles turning stark white. You cannot do this to me, Aaliyah. He pleads, the pitch of his voice rising in sheer panic. My business is completely leveraged. We do not have $18 million in liquid capital. If you call that loan, I will be bankrupt by Friday. The firm will be liquidated. I will lose everything I have ever built. You did not build anything, Trevin, I reply smoothly. Mom and Dad built it for you, and when they ran out of their own money to burn on your failures, they decided to steal mine. At that exact moment, Chloe lunges forward. The woman who just 20 minutes ago dragged me to the kitchen doors and offered me a minimum wage job, fetching coffee, is suddenly overcome with desperate affection. She completely ignores the tension, throwing her arms out, as if she is going to pull me into a tight embrace. Sister Chloe cries out, her voice dripping with a sickly, terrified sweetness. Aaliyah, please, we are family. We have to stick together. You know I have always loved you like a real sister. We just want what is best for you. Whatever silly argument happened in the past does not matter anymore. We can run the real estate empire together. You and Trevon can be co-owners. Family unity is the most important thing in the world. Please, you cannot ruin my husband. I take a deliberate step back, refusing to let her touch me. Do not call me your sister Chloe, I say, my tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. You told me I was ruining the aesthetic of your party. You told me to sit in the dark so I would not depress the investors. I am simply following your instructions. I am sitting quietly in the back, watching your entire life fall apart. Valerie pushes past Chloe, her eyes red and swimming with fresh tears. Her expensive diamond necklace heaves up and down against her chest. She reaches out with both hands, clasping them together in a gesture of profound begging. Alia, my baby, Valerie whimpers, letting the tears spill over her carefully applied makeup. Please stop this right now. You are not thinking clearly. The grief has clouded your mind. Terrence would be absolutely horrified to see you acting this way. Terrence was a good Christian man. He loved this family. He would never want you to destroy your own brother and father over money. The mention of my husband's name coming from my mother's mouth feels like a physical blow. The cold, calculated control I have maintained for the last year threatens to snap. The rage bubbling just beneath the surface of my skin flares hot and violent, but I force it down. I will not give them the satisfaction of an emotional breakdown. Do not you dare speak his name, I command, my voice cutting through the air like a razor blade. You did not even show up to his funeral. You did not show up to watch me bury my 4 babies, because you were too busy drinking champagne in a VIP lounge. You called me a hysterical, selfish widow when I refused to empty my bank accounts for you. Terrence did not love this family. He protected me from this family. And he spent the last months of his life making absolutely sure that I would have the power to protect myself when he was gone. Desmond's face turns a dangerous shade of crimson. The panic is quickly being overtaken by a desperate, cornered fury. He realizes that charm and manipulation are entirely useless. He leans heavily against the table, lowering his voice so only the five of us can hear. You think you are so smart, Aaliyah, Desmond growls, baring his teeth. You think just because you bought some corporate debt, you can stand here and dictate terms to me. I am your father. I built the reputation of this family from the ground up. You have no right to humiliate us in front of Atlanta's most powerful people. I will fight you in court for the next 10 years. I will tie up that tech money in so much litigation you will never see a single dime of it. I will claim you are mentally unfit to manage the trust. You cannot prove anything. Hai is completely unhinged, clinging to the exact same threats he used to silence me in the hallway 6 months ago. He genuinely believes that without a husband to protect me, I am just a weak, easily frightened girl who will eventually back down when confronted by his authority. He believes that because the commercial loan transaction was buried under layers of private equity paperwork, I have no idea how it was actually secured. I look at Desmond feeling a profound and deeply satisfying sense of closure. The audit is officially complete, and the final penalty is ready to be assessed. I reach into my small black silk clutch. I do not pull out a tissue. I do not pull out a phone. I pull out a thick folded stack of legal documents. I smooth them out carefully and slide them directly onto the center of the white cocktail table right next to my glass of sparkling water. The top page is a high-resolution forensic copy of the massive commercial loan guarantee. Desmond looks down at the paper. His eyes instantly lock onto the signature line at the very bottom of the page, the forged signature of Terrence Washington. Beside the loan guarantee is a printed copy of the internal email chain between Desmond and the Chicago lending firm explicitly detailing his active facilitation of the fraudulent transaction. Attached to that is the original handwritten note Terrence left taped beneath his desk drawer. The remaining color drains completely from Desmond's face. He stares at the papers as if they are a live explosive device. His mouth opens but no sound comes out. He cannot breathe. He cannot move. He is looking at undeniable printed proof of federal wire fraud and felony forgery, carrying his exact name and his exact instructions. Trevin looks down at the documents, his eyes widening in pure horror. He looks up at our father, betrayal and terror mixing on his face. You told me the collateral was clean. Trevin chokes out, his voice cracking. You told me Terrence agreed to the loan before he died. You forged his signature across state lines. Dad, that is a federal crime. Desmond does not answer his son. He is paralyzed, his eyes glued to the forensic copies resting on the table. I stand up completely straight, towering over my broken family. I look directly into my father's terrified eyes. You told me I had nothing, I say, my voice ringing with absolute undeniable finality. You were wrong. I have the receipts. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd of wealthy guests standing just a few feet away. They have seen the documents on the table. They have heard the words federal crime. The complete destruction of my family's legacy is no longer a private matter. It is a highly public execution. Before Desmond can attempt to snatch the papers off the table, before Valerie can drop to her knees and beg for mercy, the heavy atmosphere in the grand ballroom violently shifts. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows lining the front of the hotel suddenly illuminate with bright, rhythmic flashes of light. Fierce, strobing beams of blue and red pierce through the sheer curtains, casting wild shadows across the terrified faces of my parents and my brother. The sound of heavy boots marches briskly through the gilded lobby outside the ballroom doors. The police have arrived and my family's glittering world is finally going completely dark. The red and blue lights sweeping across the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Grand Georgian Ballroom do not blink. They pulse. They strobe with a violent, undeniable rhythm that completely shatters the opulent atmosphere of my brother's gala. For a few agonizing seconds, no one in the room breathes. The wealthy investors, the city council members, the socialites, dripping in diamonds, they all stand frozen like statues in a museum of excess. Then the heavy brass doors of the main entrance burst open. The sound of the doors hitting the wall echoes like a gunshot. A team of law enforcement officers marches into the glittering room. They are not local beat cops. They are wearing tactical windbreakers, emblazoned with the bright yellow letters of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, flanked by agents from the White Collar Crime Division. Their heavy rubber-soled boots thud against the polished marble floor, a stark and aggressive contrast to the delicate click of designer heels. The crowd parts instantly. The wealthy and powerful residents of Atlanta know better than to stand in the way of a federal raid. They step back, pulling their silk gowns and tailored tuxedos out of the aisle, creating a wide, unobstructed path leading directly from the entrance to table 42 in the back corner. Desmond turns around slowly. The powerful patriarch, the man who has spent his entire life bullying and manipulating everyone in his orbit, suddenly looks incredibly small. The sweat that was previously glistening on his forehead is now pouring down his face, soaking into the stiff white collar of his custom tuxedo shirt. His hands are trembling so violently that he drops them to his sides, trying to hide his loss of control. The lead federal agent, a tall man with a stern, uncompromising face, stops exactly 3 feet away from my father. Desmond Washington, the agent says. His voice is loud, carrying effortlessly through the dead silent ballroom. My father tries to summon his usual arrogant authority. He pulls his shoulders back, puffing out his chest in a pathetic attempt to intimidate the agent. There must be some kind of mistake, Desmond says, forcing a strained, hollow laugh. I am a highly respected member of this community. I know the mayor personally. I sit on the board of the Regional Commerce Committee. You are interrupting a private corporate event. I demand to speak to whoever authorized this ridiculous intrusion. The federal agent does not blink. He does not care about my father's country club memberships or his political connections. He reaches to his belt and pulls out a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. Desmond Washington, you are under arrest. Arrest, the agent announces. The words strike my father like a physical blow. You are being charged with multiple counts of federal wire fraud, interstate commerce violations, and felony forgery. A collective horrified gasp ripples through the crowd of hundreds of onlookers. People are holding up their cell phones, recording the exact moment the great Desmond Washington falls from grace. You illegally use stolen intellectual property across state lines to secure fraudulent commercial loans. The agent continues, his voice devoid of any sympathy. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. My mother Valerie lets out a piercing, hysterical shriek. She lunges forward, grabbing the sleeve of the federal agent's windbreaker. You cannot do this! Valerie screams, her perfectly styled hair falling wildly around her face. He is an innocent man. He is a good Christian. You are ruining our family. A female officer immediately steps forward, physically separating my mother from the lead agent. Ma'am, step back right now, or you will be charged with interfering with a federal investigation, she warns sharply. Valerie stumbles backward, her hands flying to her mouth as she watches the lead agent grab my father's wrists. Desmond does not fight back. He has no leverage here. He cannot bribe or intimidate a federal task force. He turns around, his head bowed in absolute and profound humiliation. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting closed around his wrists echoes clearly across the silent room. It is the most beautiful sound I have heard in exactly 1 year. I remain standing beside my table, my posture immaculate. I watch the man who threatened to leave me homeless, the man who skipped his own grandchildren's funeral for a birthday party, get reduced to a common criminal in front of every single person he ever tried to impress. The lead agent then turns his attention to my brother. Trevon Washington, the agent says. Trevon is completely falling apart. The golden child, the boy who was given every advantage, every luxury, and every ounce of my parents' conditional love, is absolutely disintegrating. His legs give out completely. He drops to his knees on the marble floor, landing right in the middle of the shattered crystal and spilled champagne from his dropped glass. He is hyperventilating, taking in short and ragged gasps of air. Dad, do something, Trevon cries out. His voice is a high-pitched and desperate whine. Tell them I did not know about the forgery. Tell them you handled the paperwork. You promised me the collateral was clean. You promised me. Desmond looks down at his son, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and shame. but he cannot say a single word to save him. The evidence sitting on the cocktail table next to me proves that they were both actively and enthusiastically involved in the conspiracy. Trevin turns to me, crawling forward a few inches on his hands and knees. The knees of his $5,000 suit pants are soaked in sticky champagne and dotted with shards of broken glass. Aaliyah, please, Trevon begs, thick tears streaming down his face. You have to tell them to stop. You have the money now. You bought the private equity firm. Just drop the charges. We are your blood. I am your brother. Please do not let them put me in federal prison. I look down at him. I look at the man who showed up at my house just 3 days after I buried my husband and babies, aggressively demanding life insurance money to fund his fake empire. I feel absolutely nothing for him. No pity, no sisterly affection. The well of my compassion dried up the day he chose to celebrate his birthday instead of burying his nephews and his niece. I did not press the criminal charges, Trevon, I say quietly. I simply submitted the forged loan documents to the proper authorities. The federal government is pressing the charges against you. You did this to yourself. Two agents step forward, grabbing Trevin by the arms and hauling him roughly to his feet. They spin him around and slam the handcuffs onto his wrists. He is sobbing loudly now, a harsh and ugly sound that makes the wealthy guests grimace and turn their faces away in second-hand embarrassment. Suddenly, a sharp and furious voice cuts through the heavy tension. "Get your hands off me," Chloe screams. Trevin's entitled white wife is frantically backing away from the scene. She is holding her hands up in the air, physically distancing herself from her handcuffed husband, as if he is carrying a highly contagious disease. Her silver sequined gown flashes under the chandelier lights as she desperately tries to save her own skin. An officer steps toward her holding a notepad. "Ma'am, we just need to ask you a few questions regarding your knowledge of your husband's financial accounts." "I know nothing!" Chloe shrieks, her voice echoing shrilly across the ballroom. "I have absolutely nothing to do with his business. He lied to me. He told me he was a successful real estate developer. I did not sign any commercial loan documents. I did not forge anyone's signature. I am a victim here." Trevon looks at his wife in sheer disbelief. "Chloe," he croaks, his voice breaking under the weight of his fear. "What are you doing? We are married. You have to call the lawyers to come help me." "I am not calling anyone for you," Chloe snaps. Her face twists into a mask of pure and vicious self-preservation. "You are a complete fraud, Trevon. You dragged me into this fake life and now you are going to prison. I am not going down with you." She turns her back on her husband without a single ounce of hesitation. The woman who just 20 minutes ago was preaching to me about the vital importance of family unity abandons her husband the exact second the money disappears. She hikes up the skirt of her expensive silver gown and literally runs toward the exit, pushing past the stunned investors and politicians. She is fleeing the gala to pack her bags, desperately trying to get out of the state before the inevitable asset freezes hit their joint bank accounts. Trayvon watches her run away, his final pillar of support vanishing into thin air. "All right, let us move," the lead agent commands. The federal agents take a firm hold of my father and my brother. They begin the long and agonizing march out of the ballroom. Desmond and Trevon are led through the wide path created by the silent and judging crowd. As they walk, I see the elite guests pulling out their phones. The flashes of 100 phone cameras illuminate the dark room, capturing every single angle of my family's ultimate and spectacular humiliation. Tomorrow morning, these photos will be on the front page of every local news site. The mighty Washington family, the untouchable pillars of Atlanta's high society, marched out of their own luxury gala in federal handcuffs. I stand tall by table 42 watching them go. The heavy black silk of my gown rustles slightly as I fold my arms across my chest. I think of Terrence's brilliant mind. I think of the long nights he spent building his software to provide a safe and beautiful life for our children. I think of Jamari, Kayla, Isaiah, and Jordan. My family tried to steal my husband's legacy. They tried to build a golden tower on top of the graveyard of my universe. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal that Trevin feels as Chloe abandons him is almost poetic. It perfectly mirrors the profound abandonment I felt when my parents chose a nightclub over a funeral. He is finally experiencing the exact and chilling isolation that he so willingly inflicted upon me. There is no golden child privilege that can charm a federal task force. There is no amount of parental enabling that can bail him out of a massive interstate wire fraud conspiracy. He is entirely on his own. As the last of the federal agents exit the room, taking the shattered remnants of my father's false empire with them, the red and blue police lights outside slowly pull away from the hotel windows. The bright and chaotic flashing fades into the dark Atlanta night, leaving the ballroom in a stunned and breathless vacuum. The morning after the grand gala, the city of Atlanta wakes up to an absolute media frenzy. My phone sits on the granite counter of my modest apartment completely silent, because I have changed my number overnight. I turn on the local news and watch the aerial footage of federal agents carrying cardboard boxes of financial records out of my brother's luxury real estate firm. The reporters speak in hushed, dramatic tones about the shocking downfall of the prominent Washington family. They show photographs of my father being placed into the back of an unmarked federal vehicle. I watch the broadcast with a cup of black coffee in my hand. I do not feel a single ounce of guilt. I only feel the profound, steady rhythm of justice finally taking its course. The physical arrest was only the beginning of their destruction. As a forensic accountant, I know that the true punishment for people like my father and my brother does not happen in a holding cell. It happens in the bank ledgers. It happens when you strip away the wealth that they used as a weapon to abuse and control everyone around them. I meet with Harrison Cole and his team of elite corporate attorneys in their downtown high-rise office. We activate the full devastating power of my blind trust. The federal government is handling the criminal charges for the wire fraud and the forged signatures across state lines. But the civil side of the financial slaughter is entirely my domain. I have legally recalled the $18 million commercial debt. Because the loan was secured with fraudulent collateral, my trust is granted immediate priority creditor status. I have the absolute legal authority to liquidate their entire lives to recoup the stolen funds. I am ruthless in my execution. I sit in conference rooms with bankruptcy trustees and federal prosecutors methodically tearing apart my family's financial infrastructure piece by piece. I audit my father's sprawling estate with a cold and clinical precision. I file the injunctions that freeze all of their checking accounts, their investment portfolios, and their offshore tax shelters. I authorize the immediate foreclosure of the massive Buckhead mansion where I grew up. The house where my parents made me feel like an invisible burden is seized by the bank. Trevin's luxury real estate firm is systematically dismantled. The high-end office furniture is sold at auction. The leased luxury vehicles that he paraded around Atlanta to project his fake success are aggressively repossessed. The firm's remaining assets do not even come close to covering the massive debt he accumulated. Because Desmond co-signed the fraudulent guarantees, his personal wealth is drained to cover the deficit. I watch the numbers shift on the financial spreadsheets. Millions of dollars are stripped from their accounts and legally transferred back into my anonymous trust. I am taking back every single cent they tried to steal from my dead husband's legacy. The collateral damage extends exactly where it belongs. Chloe, my brother's entitled white wife, attempts a desperate and vicious legal maneuver. She hires an aggressive divorce attorney demanding an expedited separation from Trevon. She files a massive lawsuit for spousal support claiming she is a victim of his deception and is legally entitled to maintain the lavish lifestyle she has grown accustomed to. She petitions the court to unfreeze their joint marital accounts. Her arrogance is truly breathtaking, but her legal strategy is entirely useless. I make sure my corporate lawyers attend her civil hearing. We present the judge with irrefutable proof that every single asset in her marriage was funded by the proceeds of a federal crime. The commercial loan guarantee supersedes any and all marital property claims. The judge throws her spousal support petition entirely out of court. Chloe is left with absolutely nothing. The woman who told me to sit in the dark by the kitchen doors is forced to move back into her parents' modest suburban home. She is stripped of her designer gowns and her country club status, completely cut off from the wealth she worshipped above human decency. Months pass as the wheels of the justice system turn. The criminal trial finally arrives in the late spring. I sit in the back row of the federal courtroom wearing a sharply tailored navy blue suit. I sit up straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I am no longer wearing a black mourning gown. I am wearing the armor of a woman who has reclaimed her own life. Desmond and Trevon are escorted into the courtroom wearing bright orange federal-issue jumpsuits. Their hands and feet are shackled with heavy chains that clink loudly against the wooden floorboards. The physical transformation in both of them is startling. Without his custom velvet tuxedos and his expensive haircuts, my father looks like an exhausted, broken old man. Trevon looks terrified, his shoulders slumped as he stares blankly at the polished wooden table of the defense stand. The federal prosecutor presents a flawless case built almost entirely on the dossier my brilliant husband Terrence had compiled before his death. The evidence is overwhelming. The email chains, the forged signatures, the clear and deliberate intent to commit interstate wire fraud. It takes the jury less than 4 hours to return a unanimous guilty verdict on all counts. The federal judge does not show a single ounce of mercy during the sentencing phase. He looks down at my father and my brother with absolute disgust. He calls their actions a profound betrayal of trust and a textbook example of corporate greed. He sentences Desmond to 10 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. He sentences Trevon to 7 years in a medium-security federal facility. The gavel bangs against the sounding block with a sharp and final crack. My father turns his head to look back at the gallery. His eyes find mine across the crowded courtroom. There is a desperate, pleading look in his expression. He is waiting for me to show a sign of forgiveness, a sign of the daughter who spent her entire life desperate for his approval. I do not blink. I do not offer him a single trace of emotion. I hold his gaze with a chilling, absolute emptiness until the federal marshals grab his arms and drag him through the heavy wooden side doors. He is gone, locked away in a concrete box, completely stripped of his power and his pride. The destruction of my family is nearly complete, but the most pathetic casualty is left standing outside the courtroom doors. My mother Valerie has been entirely destroyed by the fallout. With Desmond locked in federal prison and their entire financial portfolio seized to repay the stolen funds, she is completely destitute. The elite African-American society of Atlanta, that she spent decades catering to, has aggressively and permanently shut her out. When she tries to call Pastor Hughes for spiritual guidance and financial charity, his secretary hangs up on her. When she tries to show up at the Oakwood Country Club, the security guards publicly escort her off the premises. In a world where reputation is currency, she is completely bankrupt. She is forced to pack her remaining clothes in cheap plastic garbage bags and move into a tiny rundown one-bedroom apartment in a dangerous, neglected neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. She has no staff. She has no valets. She has no golden child to brag about to her friends. She only has the crushing, suffocating silence of her own consequences. On the exact anniversary of the day, my father told me I had nothing and needed to know my place. My cell phone rings. The caller identification shows an unknown number, likely a cheap prepaid phone. I answer the call and place the phone against my ear. Alia, my mother's voice, comes through the speaker. She is weeping uncontrollably, her breath catching in wet, desperate sobs. Please do not hang up on me. I am begging you. I have nothing left. The electricity in my apartment is going to be shut off tomorrow. I cannot afford to buy groceries. Aaliyah, please, you have so much money. You have hundreds of millions of dollars. You can save me. I am your mother. Family is all we have left in this world. I listened to her cry. I listened to the woman who called me a disappointment, the woman who told me I was a selfish and hysterical widow, reduce herself to begging for scraps. I think about the 42-second phone call where she and my father refused to attend the funeral of my 4 beautiful children. I think about how quickly she abandoned me when I needed her the most. I do not feel anger anymore. The ledger is perfectly balanced. I look out the window of my beautiful sunlit office. I take a slow, deep breath, letting the clean air fill my lungs. Today is the anniversary of my husband and my children's death. I say, my voice perfectly smooth and incredibly cold, echoing the exact cruelty my father showed me. I cannot help you. Handle the arrangements yourself. I do not wait for her response. I press the red button on the screen and the line goes completely dead. I open the settings on my phone and block the prepaid number permanently. I block every single known contact associated with my mother, my father, my brother, and my former sister-in-law. I place the phone face down on the desk. The silence in the room is not heavy or suffocating. It is the most beautiful, peaceful silence I have ever experienced. I have systematically dismantled the people who tried to destroy my life. I have severed the toxic bloodline forever. There will be no more abuse, no more gaslighting, and no more forgiveness. The past is completely dead, and I am finally ready to build the future my husband and my children deserved. The peaceful silence in my office stretches out for a long, profound moment. The phone remains face down on my polished mahogany desk, a cold piece of metal that no longer holds any power over my emotions. I have blocked the numbers. I have severed the toxic roots that tied me to a family of parasites. For the first time in 35 years, I am not bracing myself for a critique. I am not waiting to be pushed aside for my brother. I am not standing in the shadow of my parents' manufactured empire. I am simply breathing, feeling the steady rhythmic beating of my own heart. The ledger of my past is perfectly and permanently balanced. But a balanced ledger is only a starting point. As a forensic accountant, I know that zeroing out a debt is merely the foundation required to build something new. I did not systematically dismantle my bloodline just to sit in an empty room surrounded by hundreds of millions of dollars. Terrence did not spend countless sleepless nights writing brilliant lines of code so that his widow could live like a wealthy hermit. He built that encryption algorithm to provide a beautiful, limitless future for our children. And even though my children are gone, that future still belongs to them. I pick up my desk phone and dial the direct line to Harrison Cole. When the senior wealth manager answers, his voice carries the usual crisp professionalism, but there is a new layer of profound respect. He has watched me execute a flawless financial dismantling of the people who tried to defraud my trust. He knows exactly what I am capable of. Harrison, I say, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling Atlanta skyline. The liquidation phase is officially complete. The private equity firm has absorbed the assets from the defaulted commercial loans. The real estate brokerage is dissolved. I want to completely divest from that sector. We are entering the legacy phase. I am ready when you are, Aaliyah. Harrison replies smoothly. How would you like to restructure the capital? I want to establish a philanthropic foundation. I instruct him, my voice steady and filled with absolute purpose. I want to take the initial $350 million, along with every single cent we recouped from the liquidation of my father and brother's assets, and place it into an irrevocable charitable trust. We are going to name it the Terrence Washington Memorial Foundation. I spend the next 6 months applying the exact same relentless forensic focus to building my charity that I used to destroy my family. I do not just hand the money over to existing organizations and step away. I build the infrastructure from the ground up. I hire a board of directors composed of educators, community leaders, and ethical financial experts. I create a fully transparent, highly audited operational model. My parents spent their entire lives hiding behind fraudulent paperwork and fake luxury. My foundation will operate in the pure, undeniable light of day. The first initiative we launch is an expansive scholarship program specifically aimed at brilliant, underprivileged African American youth across the South. We establish massive endowments at historically Black colleges and universities. We fully fund tuition, housing, and living expenses for young men and women pursuing degrees in software architecture, computer science, and cybersecurity. I personally interview the final candidates for the Terrence Washington Innovation Fellowship. I sit across the table from young, nervous, brilliant students who remind me so much of my husband when we first met in college. I listen to their dreams. I look at their coding portfolios. I tell them that they do not have to take out predatory student loans or work 3-night jobs just to survive. I tell them their education is fully paid for. Watching the sheer disbelief and overwhelming joy wash over their faces heals a small broken piece of my soul every single time. Terrence's genius was stolen by my family to fund a fake real estate firm, but I have reclaimed it. Now his legacy is the spark that will ignite thousands of new brilliant careers. But I know I cannot stop at the scholarships. The scholarships honor my husband, but I have 4 beautiful babies whose memories need to be permanently anchored to this earth. I purchase a massive plot of undeveloped land in the heart of a neglected Atlanta neighborhood, an area that the city's wealthy elite normally ignore. I hire the best architects and urban planners in the country. I pour my grief, my love, and my millions into the blueprints. We break ground on a massive state-of-the-art community children's center. It takes a year and a half to complete the construction. During that time, I do not hear a single word from my former family. Desmond and Trevon are locked away in federal prisons, stripped of their bespoke suits and their unearned arrogance. Valerie remains isolated in her rundown apartment, a ghost of the Atlanta social scene. Chloe has vanished into suburban obscurity. They are serving out the heavy sentences of their own consequences, completely removed from my reality. I do not check on them. I do not wonder how they are doing. They are closed accounts. Today is a bright, warm Saturday morning in the middle of spring. The air smells like fresh rain and blooming jasmine. It has been over 2 years since the crash on the overpass, and I am standing in the sunlit courtyard of the newly completed Washington Family Children's Center. I am not wearing a black morning gown today. I have permanently retired the dark armor of a grieving widow. Today, I am wearing a vibrant emerald green dress that catches the morning sunlight. My hair is styled naturally, and a genuine effortless smile rests on my face. The center is buzzing with the beautiful, chaotic noise of hundreds of families from the surrounding neighborhood. There are no jazz bands playing background music. There are no waiters carrying crystal flutes of expensive champagne. There are no corrupt politicians or predatory investors trying to network. The people here today are genuine. They are working-class parents, excited teenagers, and wide-eyed children running across the manicured lawns. I walk through the main double doors and step into the grand foyer of the center. The architecture is breathtaking. Massive skylights allow natural sunshine to flood the corridors, illuminating the brightly painted walls and the polished hardwood floors. Every single wing of this massive facility has been purposefully designed and named to honor the specific beautiful traits of my 4 babies. I walk past the Jamari Washington Robotics Lab, where high school students are already crowded around workbenches, learning to build and program mechanical devices. Jamari always loved taking his toys apart to see how they worked. I watch a young boy excitedly hold up a small robot he just programmed, and I feel a profound warmth expand in my chest. I continue down the hall and look through the glass doors of the Kayla Washington Fine Arts Studio. The room is filled with easels, vibrant paints, and pottery wheels. Kayla used to cover our kitchen table in crayons and construction paper, completely lost in her own colorful imagination. Now dozens of children will have a safe, fully funded space to discover their own artistic voices. Further down the corridor is the twin wing dedicated to Isaiah and Jordan. It houses a massive indoor playground and a specialized early childhood development center. The sound of toddlers laughing and running echoes down the hallway, a bright and musical sound that makes me close my eyes and just listen for a moment. It is the exact same joyful noise that used to fill my house on Saturday mornings. I reach the very center of the building, a quiet, beautifully designed rotunda, featuring a small indoor fountain and walls of exposed historic brick. I stop walking. I stand completely alone in the center of the sunlit room, looking at the massive bronze plaque mounted securely to the brick wall. The bronze is polished and gleaming. The letters are engraved deeply into the metal, ensuring they will remain visible for generations to come. I read the names slowly. Terrence, Jamari, Kayla, Isaiah, Jordan. Beneath their names is a simple inscription, built on a foundation of unconditional love, a legacy of brilliance, creativity, and boundless joy. I reach out and press my fingertips against the cool bronze of Terrence's name. The crushing, breathless agony that once paralyzed me in that sterile hospital hallway is gone. The white-hot, destructive rage that fueled my meticulous corporate revenge has entirely evaporated. What remains is a deep, unshakable peace. The scars on my heart are thick and permanent, but they no longer define my every waking moment. My parents tried to teach me that love was a transaction. They tried to show me that loyalty only belonged to the golden child, and that the scapegoat was simply a resource to be consumed and discarded. They tried to take the horrific tragedy of my life and use it as a stepping stone to elevate their own fraudulent empire. They failed because they drastically underestimated the quiet daughter who always balanced the books. They thought I was weak because I chose a peaceful life over their chaotic social climbing. They never realized that standing in the shadows gave me the perfect vantage point to study all of their structural weaknesses. I look at the plaque one last time. I drop my hand to my side and turn around facing the bright, noisy, vibrant hallways of the Children's Center. I am 37 years old. I am a forensic accountant. I am a philanthropist. I am a woman who walked through the absolute fires of hell and emerged completely unburned. I am no longer the invisible scapegoat. I am no longer the helpless weeping widow standing over empty pews. I am the sole protector of the Washington legacy. I enforced absolute uncompromising justice upon the people who tried to bury me. I took the stolen capital of a broken family and transformed it into a permanent fortress of hope and opportunity. I step out of the quiet rotunda and walk back into the sunlight, joining the crowd of families celebrating in the courtyard. The air is warm, the sky is perfectly clear, and the future finally belongs entirely to me.